Life, said Piggy expansively, is scientific. That's what it is. In a year or two, when the war's over, they'll be traveling to Mars and back. I know there isn't no beast. Not with claws and all that, I mean. But I know there isn't no fear, either. Piggy paused. Unless... Ralph moved restlessly. Unless what? Unless we get frightened of people. That's it. That's the review. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my review of Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This is a classic novel that a lot of people I know had to read during middle school, junior high, high school, somewhere in there. I never did, and so this has been on my I need to read this classic list for quite a while. And it's so short that I knew that I could probably just breeze through it, right? It wasn't going to be a long read. I would be lying if I said I didn't know what to expect on at least some level. I knew that this was not going to be a pick-me-up book, okay? Like, I had already gotten to that expectation. But what I didn't anticipate was just how deeply this book was going to make me think and process themes that I have traditionally magnetized toward in a lot of books that I've read my entire life. Basic premise of this book is that a group of schoolboys are involved in a plane crash that lands on an island in the middle of absolutely nowhere in the ocean, and the only survivors are a group of schoolboys. And at first, everything seems like we're working together, we're gonna try and set up some kind of a shelter and society, and we need to do these things, and we need to be rescued. And that begins to very quickly crumble as different hierarchies kind of chafe at each other within the group. And the society that at the beginning starts off so strong and focused begins to immediately crumble around them as the different personalities clash, and there are some boys who are really enjoying this adventure on the island, and some boys that are really focused on the fact that, like, we are going to die, we need a signal fire, we need a shelter, we need food, we need basic survival elements. And it's really, really interesting because at first it starts to read as the kind of survival story that I think we've read before, right? And I just recently read Hatchet by Gary Paulson, and I have a lot to say about that book as well. But in that case, it was a single character who had to survive on his own, as opposed to in Lord of the Flies, where we have this group of characters who all are very quickly dwindling back into their primal instincts. I would love to reread this book already. Like, the minute I closed the book, I felt like I wanted to reread it, which for me is a really, really good sign, because I wanted to explore it deeper. I wanted to dig further into the characters that William Golding presents, because each of them represents, I think, a different survival instinct, a different level of maturity in some ways. There's a lot of different themes that you can pull from this book. One of the ones that I want to focus on a little bit that I think really stuck out to me, because it's something that I read and explore in a lot of the other books that I get into, is the idea of what happens when human beings are pressed into a very uncomfortable and deadly survival situation, and how those personalities fit into that environment, how they either embrace it or recoil from it, how they turn into or against their fellow humans who are in the group and in the environment with them. And this book did not disappoint in those areas. And even though the focus is children, which makes it doubly disturbing, I think that the implications of human beings reverting to this kind of primal crumbling of society is there's so much here, you guys. There's so much packed into this little book. I was honestly not expecting to get as emotional about this book as I did. I'm gonna mention a few characters specifically here, and they are kind of the crux of the story, although there are definitely other characters that are important throughout the pages. The first one is Ralph. Ralph is the original leader of this group of boys. When they crash on the island, Ralph kind of steps into that leadership position because he's got kind of a more steady head on his shoulders, and he's thinking, okay, we've crashed here, we need to set ourselves up for success, right? And so he kind of takes on that little adult role. On the opposite end of the leadership scales is Jack. Jack is a character who originally kind of goes along with Ralph's leadership, and he doesn't love it, but he's like, yeah, okay, all right, fine. I just want to be involved with the hunting, and like he's more of the, I want to go outdoors and I want to chase something down and I want to get us some food and I want to go hunting. And he's really embracing this kind of survival environment. Whereas Ralph is embracing the idea that we need to get off of this island as soon as possible. I think those two kind of set up the spectrum for the general cast of characters, but there are a couple of outliers that I found really interesting. There's a character named Piggy who kind of is Ralph's wingman from the beginning, even though he is bullied horribly by the other boys. He's constantly trying to provide some kind of a mature perspective on their situation and on the actions of the other boys. And he's the one who's most concerned about, what about the adults? What are the adults gonna think? You guys are acting like a bunch of kids, right? So he takes it even a step farther than Ralph does, in that I'm trying to replicate adult leadership on this hopeless survival situation with this group of boys. Despite this book not being very long, we see the relationships between these characters bend and fray and morph and rip apart in some cases. And I think putting that pressure of the survival environment that they're in really pulls their deeper core personalities to the forefront, which is, again, something I always find really fascinating about any kind of survival story. The kind of you're either going to bend or break kind of thing, and which boys break and which boys are able to survive not just the physical surroundings, but also the mental strain of being placed in a situation where they are not being provided for. They are not being kept safe by the adults in their lives anymore. They are literally left to their own devices. And who is trying to be responsible with that and who is trying to use it to their advantage or goes completely off the deep end. I think this book really, at its core, shows us how the biggest battle in any kind of a situation like this is against our own mind. And that takes different manifestations throughout the characters, throughout the book. We have a madness arc in this book that I think was really, really powerfully written and chilling. We have, the fears that our minds create versus the physical fears that are right in front of us that we have to deal with, and which one of those pushes us over the brink faster. The prose in this book is really powerful. It is sparse, but when he wants to go deep, he really twists in the prose and uses just the exact words to elicit the response he's looking for from the reader. And he can elicit the emotions so easily with a few words, and that's something I've always found incredibly impressive. These boys are basically a micro study of what's going on in the larger world around them. When the plane crashes on the island, we're kind of on the cusp of the next world war outside of this island, and the boys are aware, obviously, of that. But when Piggy comes in and is constantly saying, what would the adults think? What are the adults going to think when they see us? You guys are acting like a bunch of kids. It's so potent because you as the reader realize that outside of this island and outside of this crumbling society that the boys are trying to create and failing to is a larger stage where almost the exact same thing is happening. And that kind of blind trust that Piggy has that the adults can make everything better, the adults would be able to fix this, we need to act like the adults, is so sad when you realize that, back home, this same thing is going on, and the society and the people in it are just clashing and at each other's throats very similarly to the way that the boys are on the island. This is a very dark coming-of-age novel. You have these boys coming up against things that they've never experienced before to this degree, if at all. The first time that they've faced true hunger and horrible sickness and being completely stranded out and not knowing if you're safe. You don't have those four walls keeping you safe from the terrors in the night. You have these boys confronting death for the first time, confronting murder for the first time. And there's such a loss of innocence in this book that is kind of a dichotomy with the fact that when humankind reverts to its like natural state, is there any good left? And there's so many good themes in this book, you guys. So what I'm saying with all of this is that I highly recommend this. If you have been looking to get into some easier classic reads in terms of easy prose, very characters that will pull you in right away, highly recommend William Golding's Lord of the Flies. I would also recommend being aware of the heavy topics going into it. There is definitely some very chilling, very dark subject matter in this book, so just be aware of that. This is a book I'd really like to reread and go through the characters in a deeper analysis, because there's so much there, and I keep going back and thinking about them even though I've finished the book now. Anyway, guys, that is my review for Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Thank you so much for watching. Give a like and subscribe if you like the content, and I would love to have you stick around my little corner of the internet. I hope you are having a fantastic week. I hope you are reading 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video.